Roger, operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and many blessings this holiday season. Welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West, here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Now, as usual, I'll give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it first, followed by a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. And then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it, folks. So let's waste no time. Oh, yeah. Let's get to it. Story number 1. $45 million proposal. $15 million in American Rescue Plan funds for a safety services building has been proposed in Youngstown, according to a Mediator report published December 19th by David Skolnick. Now, the building will be constructed on the city's north side. There is a lot tied into this story, especially when talking about ARP spending. The article ends by stating that City Finance Director Cal Miasek, he emphasized how all ARP money needs to be allocated by the end of next year. Story number 2. More levy talk in Poland. Poland is looking to voters again for a $358,000 tax levy on the March 19th primary election ballot. Now, Ungaro informed voters that the levy will only serve as a replacement levy for money being lost. Now, the article written by J.T. Whitehouse of the Vindicator on December 19th serves its purpose by informing voters of any confusion that they may have about the levy. Now, when skimming through the article, the reader may question what actually the levy is for. Now, even with the headline, no new taxation. Now, in all, it appears that the money on the ballot that they're asking for is a tax to replace money lost. So the question at the end of reading the article may confuse the voter and the reader on how can you ask for money and say it's not a tax if the voter still has to pay. Story number 3. $600K given to YNDC for Glenwood duplexes. Now, either YNDC has found a loophole or the organization is quietly rebuilding Youngstown neighborhoods for the greater good. Either way, a $600,000 grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh has given the organization more money to build 2 new duplexes on Glenwood Avenue in the organization's ongoing effort to rehabilitate the Youngstown, or the south side of Youngstown, Idora, and Glenwood area. Now, YNDC has also made national news on several occasions in what appears to be the biggest experiment to see what it would take to rebuild dilapidated houses in rundown urban cities, or rundown cities, to make that verbiage a little bit better. Now, either way, local real estate gurus are taking notice, and some may even protest, saying that this is unfair and that it's not fair when they too have properties that need rehabilitation. Where's their money? Now, YNDC was destined to make it into the top 8. And everyone who spends money and needs money to reinvest in their properties is watching the story because it's still developing. Now, YNDC is a nonprofit organization. If you did not know, they are actually getting funding to rebuild dilapidated neighborhoods and revitalize properties. Now, this YNDC has been building an extensive portfolio in their revitalization progress in their properties that they've been revitalizing in Youngstown. Story number 4. Senate seat up for grabs. 5 people have filed for Congressman Bill Johnson's seat. Democrats, they're first up on the list. Ryland Zachary Fenzer is filed for 1. Michael L. Kripchak, Democrat number 2. Now, Republicans, Rick Sy, Michael Ruley, and Reggie Stoltzfus, all filing for they want that seat that will be vacated by Congressman Bill Johnson. Now, another eye-popping article published December 19th by the Mediator by David Skolnick digs into what appears to be the future for Bill Johnson. The headline reads, How Bill Johnson Purchased a $562,000 condo in Canfield in which he will not be living in, but will use as an investment property. Congressman Johnson will live in the Pollock House on Wick Avenue at no cost. That's on YSU's campus. Now, what got the story in are the surprise moves taking place by area representatives. Story number 5, pay increases in Austintown. Austintown okays an 8.7% pay increase for its department heads. Trustees approved raises for Police Chief Robert Gavalier, Fire Chief Andy Frost, and Zoning Inspector Darren Crivelli. Now, this story is still developing and is currently being processed by Township Administrator Mark D. Diapolito and Township Trustee. Story number 6, $84 million for lead mitigation. Governor Mike DeWine has announced a state grant for a Lead Safe Ohio program. The money will be used to mitigate and prevent lead contamination in residential properties, child care facilities, and congregate care facilities in 72 counties, according to the state. $6,455,000 combined was allocated to Trumbull, Mahoning, Portage, and Columbiana County. Story number 7 and the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Just in case you think you're untouchable, you think that you don't have to be informed, you don't have to do anything but live your life, there are news stories happening right around you that could someday grab you and get you in tune to reality. Story number 7, $2 million for Valley Vision. $2 million. That's big money. $2 million was handed out for the Mahoning and Trumbull County Valley Vision 2050. The plan is for economic development and hopes to stabilize and expand Valley businesses while increasing public awareness of arts and cultural industries. The Vindicator report, published December 21st by Mason Cole, goes on to explain the goals of the entire project. Now, it talks about how they plan to increase public participation in workforce training, expand education, create more employment opportunities, and assist nonprofits and local business. Story number 8 and the top local headline and developing news story that made it this week. This Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, if you're watching on Monday, to keep you informed, show you that there's good, there's bad, there's ugly, there's pretty. But in the middle, you have to decide what you want to be, what you want to do, what you want to preach, and what you want to report on. So I'm stuck in the middle, choosing sometimes the good, sometimes bad, sometimes ugly, sometimes pretty, to keep everything balanced out. City Council has approved 3 ordinances to spend a combined $10 million in American Rescue Plan funds for a housing program. $5 million will be used to create a fund for down payments and interior work for those wanting to buy houses in the city. Now, $3 million will be used for a residential facade program, and $2 million will be used for a landlord revolving loan fund, according to a Vindicator report published December 21st by David Skolnick. This story made it in because housing, once again, is in the headlines. Money for projects dominated this week's local reports. Well, folks, those are our top 8 local headlines in developing news stories that I made this week. I'll be right back with the top 8 international headlines in developing news stories. So don't you go anywhere. In the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
The city of hope. The city of hope.
Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Folks, I am not going to lie to you. Around this holiday season, I am starting to understand the magic and why the story of Jesus and Yeshua, Yahweh, has to stay alive. I mean, sometimes I'm not gonna lie to you, it feels like I'm a superhero when I come into the studio to do this show, because I have to go through tons of things, tons of stories, and it does something to me internally, because I'm one of those type people that I feel like I have to do something, you know. And when we look at Christmas, we look at the fact that there's good kids, bad kids, good people, bad people. So for this show, I had to analyze what is good. You know, what is good? What happens if Santa Claus doesn't show up? Do I steal? Do I rob people? Do I kill people? Do I start a war? Do I smack somebody? Do I beat my wife? Do I beat my kids? What is good? And I'm not going to lie to you, doing this show, I've come to realize what good actually is. I'm not going to lie to you. I meet a lot of people. I report on a lot of things. This is probably show. I've been on over 200 shows. If you add radio, probably more than that. So if I haven't figured out what good is by now, then I may be a little bit confused. But folks, this Christmas, this holiday season, if you don't celebrate Christmas, find the good in the people around you. Find the good in your family. Find the good in yourself. Find the good in the greatest story that people may not want to read, may not want to understand. But no matter what we do, when you look at the holy books, they're still the best-selling books across the world. That means that these stories have turned people into magnificent beings, superheroes. When people have had nothing left, they have turned to the Bible, the holy books, the scriptures, to get themselves back on track. So if there's not power, if there's not something magical about these stories, why come in here? Why give my time? I mean, I'm a sinner like everybody else. I've done some things in my life. When I was a young kid, I still love women. I practice self-control. But if it was for me, I'd be blessing all of them. Like they say, shoot, some of these prophets, they talk about the heavens, virgins coming out, spilling out. But because of this concept of good, I fix my conscience, get myself cleaned up, put on my superhero outfit, and come in here to give you the top 8. And in the process, asking for forgiveness from wanting to be blessed this holiday season by beautiful elves, beautiful women dressed in Santa Claus hats, thirsting to be blessed. Well, I'm fighting for my blessing. And I'm fighting for a blessing this holiday season. Blessings are made around the Christmas tree. Holy, holy sweet lakes. I'll keep the rest to myself. If sex sells, I don't want to be naughty. And folks, I don't want to be nice, but I want to be good to be blessed. Well, folks, enough of that. Let's waste no time. Let's keep this Christmas crack-a-lacking. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Being good. Speaking of being good, is diversity really the issue? Black Jesus, white Jesus, Puerto Rican Jesus, Mexican Jesus, black Santa Claus, white Santa Claus, diversity. Several articles have the diversity story staying in the headlines. Afrotech has a piece highlighting how a bipartisan bill could pose as a new threat to diversity of elite colleges and universities. Now, according to the piece, the bill would ban private colleges and universities such as Harvard University and Yale University from accepting federal student loans and instead enact the expansion of short-term Pell Grants. Now, Congresswoman Lucy McBath says that the goal is to require institutions with large endowments to meet the financial obligations of all students. Now, there is a but in this story, though. According to the piece, now The Atlantic notes that not only would the bill make middle-class students and graduate students more likely to have to take out private loans, but also is the threat to diversity at elite colleges, according to the article. Story number 2, real retail stores, little retail stores, small business retail stores are hanging on by a thread and spending money to stop thefts. Now, does the man who says that it's okay to steal send someone to do his dirty work for him? That's a big question this holiday season. Somebody is orchestrating these thefts. Now, NBC News has a piece specially written about how organized retail crime is a big problem. CNBC has a piece about how theft and violence has caused Target to close stores. Story number 3, the immigration story is staying in the headlines. Folks, the Biden administration has a problem. The world's unfortunate people need a provider and a secure nation willing to let them in at any means necessary, at all costs. Now, several immigration stories are keeping this story in major headlines. The Washington Examiner has an entire piece explaining how Title 42 expulsion has turned into a nightmare under what now appears to be Biden's failure at the border. Now, the article goes on to explain how an analysis conducted by MPI concludes that Biden has taken more than 500 executive actions on immigration since 2021. Now, more than the existing record of 472 set during the entire Trump administration. The piece is fairly written. That means it's fair. And when it's the way it's been written, it goes on to explain the current president's agenda and goal while also comparing Trump's goals under Title 42. So that means it shows you both sides. Now, the entire immigration story falls into one category, and that is the law. Who is breaking the law proposed by the American people? Story number 4, paycheck to paycheck. From ultra-rich Americans having too many mansions to the American dream costing $3.4 million and over $1 trillion U.S. Treasury notes flooding the world's currency system. The paycheck-to-paycheck syndrome is alive and well, folks, and some people don't even have a paycheck headed into the new year. How did this happen? Now, for some odd reason, the story is staying in the headlines, and everybody is talking money. Well, folks, those are our top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I'll be right back with the top 4, so don't you go anywhere. You're the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that I made it this week on Christmas Eve. I'm dedicated, devoted. Folks, I was looking at some news story. We talking about bad and good on Christmas. Bad things and good things. A lump of coal or a present. Folks, I was watching this video. Man was by his truck. Don't tell me what went down because the video didn't even have sound. One of the brothers' trucks was turned over, and the other brother was standing by his truck. Guy comes out of the other truck that was turned over and rushes the dude whose truck was sitting right there. Bam! Dude hit him with a pole. Then they start grumbling and stumbling. Woo-wee! I'm assuming, I can only assume by watching the video, but this is the stuff justice officials have to deal with this holiday season. I'm assuming that the brother in the truck hit the dude that's truck was turned over, and the dude inside the truck got pissed off. and decided he wanted to bust some skulls. Because he got in an accident, he probably had to pay the insurance company, everything. He probably lost his job if he didn't get this struck right. So he said, forget it, I'm going to take matters into my own hand. I'm going to bust a brother up. Whew. Good and bad. This holiday season, we have to decide between good and bad. Whether to take matters into our own hands or bust somebody's skull. Or put it in the hands of Jesus, Yeshua, Yahweh, or whoever the prophets that we serve, God, and ask for forgiveness of our sins after we bust some skulls. Because this is Christmas. The reason for the season is Yeshua, Yahweh, God, Jesus, or whoever you want to call God. But it has something to do with this holiday that a lot of people are deciding to take matters into their own hands and forget. Well, folks, that's our message for this week. The good and bad. And would you walk away if somebody just cost you your job? Would you have enough patience to turn the other cheek? Would you decide to go to war if somebody busts your stuff up? This is big questions. Who's going to bear the burdens, folks? Well, folks, let's waste no time. Let's get to it. Story number 5. Did the U.S. dodge a recession? Big question. The Washington Post has a headline focusing on how everyone expected a recession, but the Fed and White House found a way out. Whew. The piece goes on to explain the ups and downs in the current economic market and how this economy is ending the year in a better position, with better positions than anyone expected. Predicted. They were predicting the worst. The article even talks about inflation, unemployment, and the Fed's decision to hike rates. Overall, the piece succeeds at briefly telling the story of how the U.S. may have dodged a recession and even speaks on the political infighting and bank failures that took place in the process. Headed into 2024, this story is still developing and deserves to be told from all angles. Now, Reuters has a piece with the headline that U.S. labor market resilience has kept the economy afloat. Story number 6, corporate debt defaults. Axios has an article by Kate Marino focusing on how corporate debt defaults have been climbing all year. Now, the piece says that in November, it reached its historical average of 4.1%, according to the S&P Global rating, having everything to do with the Fed's interest rate hikes and how they are squeezing the company balance sheets, corporate company balance sheets, because a growing number of companies can't make their interest payments or can't afford to refinance their debt. Now, Axios has another piece stating that GM is set to lay off 1,300 workers at 2 Michigan plants. Story number 7, and the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made this week. Folks, I hope I have been good this year, this holiday season. I've tried my best. I am not perfect. Folks, I'm not going to lie to you. The world is filled with beauty. The world is filled with sweetness. But I've tried to work my way through the storm and be a good young man for the world. We're not always perfect. We're not always good, but I've decided to take on the job as Santa this year. Story number 7, war is trouble. Bloomberg has an article written by Anna Montero and Simon Marks, December 21st, on how the UN Food Agency paused Sudan aid to 800,000 people over a war. Now, the piece explains the brutality and the growing chaos caused by spreading war. Story number 8, and the top international headline that made it this week. Oh, yeah. Gonna get in here and we're gonna tell the top stories, baby. All my hockamaniacs. Ooh, run wild on you this Christmas. My media maniacs, baby. Story number 8. 20,000 plus people lost in Gaza. Folks, this is a sad, sad story. Folks, war is sad. Especially when you haven't been good and when you've been good and you get upset by bad. War is sad. And those who survive end up with so much pain in their memories, their brain, that it drives them over the edge. People like me, people like veterans, drive us over the edge, with some people doing some extraordinary things. Some people even become heroes. Some people live with it, getting up day by day, night by night, with the scars of losing children to the street gangs, the violence, losing loved ones on the battlefield, seeing abuse, the trauma. NBC News has a piece stating that about 20,000 people have been killed in Gaza, with little to no hospitals left. Folks, that's sad. Could you imagine waking up having nowhere to go for help, having no one to call to get the people who are terrorizing you out? Folks, this is bad. Israel has displaced around 90% of the population and leveled 40,000 buildings, according to the United Nations estimates. Why this happened? Because of Hamas? Why did it happen? Is it because of Hamas, or is it something deeper? Something that a lot of people are calling a conspiracy. Now, Palestinian civilians are searching for shelter, food, clean water, and medical care. 70% of the people killed were women and children. Well, folks, those are our top 8 local and international headlines and developing news stories that made this week. I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of doing the research. As usual, I'd like to thank all the news outlets, journalists, and people on the front lines. You deserve all the credit. I am just the media, the man in the middle, navigating the news just to keep people informed. Folks, be blessed this holiday season. Be thankful for another year once we make it through, Lord willing. And please don't forget and take time out to have a moment of silence for those people who we've lost and those people who will not be with us next year. I pray that we all someday will put down the weapons and come to peace. Well, folks, I'm out here. I'll be back next week looking over 200 more stories just to keep you informed heading into the new year. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator with me, Brian West. Peace.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.